Julia Brown is a senior research scientist at Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences. She earned her bachelor's degree in chemistry, woohoo, from Carleton College. I bet most people say, ugh, right? For chemistry?
I don't know.
Oh, that's what I got.
I mean, I do now, actually. I don't do it much anymore.
Oh, all right.
Sorry.
Well, it doesn't matter. All right.
I'll talk about it.
We should probably get on to what we're actually here for, right?
Yeah.
And a PhD in microbiology from Cornell University, and worked as a postdoctoral fellow in systems and computational biology at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. I give all of this as a background because I want you to understand, like, these guys are all that, but also, like, Maine has people who have dedicated themselves and gone all over the world, but now are here, and how great is that for us? So that's kind of why I do the background. Luckily for Maine, Julia came to Bigelow in 2016 as a bioinformatician. Is that how you say that?
Bioinformatician.
Thank you. For the Single Cell Genomics Center in 2016, she's worked on multiple high-impact research projects, including the discovery of novel marine viruses and discovery that viruses serve as a food source for the ocean's smallest eukaryotes. So the best thing is I make them talk in normal human language, but I do not do that. So you can ask them about these things later. Her research utilizes integrated field-based sampling approaches coupled with state-of-the-art nucleic acid sequencing technologies and advanced bioinformatic analyses to draw out novel, otherwise unforeseen connections and relationships. Julia is also involved in educational activities at Bigelow through hosting interns, teaching for Bigelow's Sea Change semester, and hosting workshops. And her favorite science-themed popular culture item is This Week in Virology podcast.
Has anybody heard of that?
Has anyone?
Has anybody? All right. It's popular culture, I think.
You feel like
It was
you do not have to defend your choice.
But it was really hot during COVID. I thought that some people might, All right. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to tell you about viruses at low oxygen. So I am a microbial oceanographer, and that means that what I study and what I'm most interested in is understanding the relationship between viruses and microbes and what that means in ocean ecosystems. And so the ecosystem one of them that I'm working on that I want to tell you about today are oxygen minimum zones. So this is a map of the world, but we're looking at the ocean in particular. And all of those places where there are concentrated blue are places where somewhere in the water column, the concentration of oxygen reaches virtually zero. And these places are naturally occurring in the global ocean because of the way that ocean currents work. But they are expanding because the oceans are warming. And so to understand these oxygen minimum zones, I forgot to say, these are relevance to people. When these shift around or fishes swim into them, they can die, and they create these really massive and significant pictures and that have big implications for fisheries because the fish die when there's no oxygen to breathe in the water. So how is oxygen cycled in the ocean? How are these formed? So oxygen enters through the atmosphere, through deep ocean circulation, and through photosynthesis. So there are small plants in the ocean called phytoplankton that are fixing carbon dioxide and generating oxygen, as well as a lot of organic matter, which I'm depicting as leaves here, but that's not what's there. Apologies. That organic matter accumulates and sinks, and there are microbes in the water that take that organic matter and essentially decompose it, and as they do so, they use oxygen. And so that's the way that oxygen is removed from the water. When there's a lot of circulation and these processes are kind of balanced, oxygen is maintained, which is mostly what happens like in the Gulf of Maine. But in some places in the ocean where there's a lot of nutrients in the surface and not a lot of circulation, that increases the amount of phytoplankton that are there and creating organic matter, which is then ramps up decomposition and oxygen consumption. And this causes an oxygen minimum zone in the midwater. And when you add temperature, less oxygen can be dissolved, more microbial respiration happens, and these zones expand. So what about viruses and microbes? So what's really interesting is the microbial processes in these low oxygen places change. Those microbes are no longer consuming oxygen, but instead they're consuming nitrogen in a process called denitrification. And there's some byproducts of this process that have sort of implications for climate change that are themselves greenhouse gases. So my team has visited 3 of the largest oxygen minimum zones in the world in the last 4 years. And we've been part of these huge international teams of scientists that have all been devoted to understanding the roles and impact of these microbes in oxygen minimum zones. And so I work with very closely with collaborators that are really focused on the microbes, looking at at what rates microbes carry out denitrification or consume nitrogen using in situ incubators, and others who are looking at the DNA and RNA of the microbes to figure out who those microbes are and what genes they're using. I'm sort of leading the virus finding efforts of these projects. Viruses infect everything, or there is a virus that can infect everything that's alive. Not one virus, no, never mind, you know what I mean. But they infect those microbes, and as they do so, they impact the processes that those microbes are, the chemical processes that those microbes are carrying out. And I'm excited about this work because we know very little about the role of viruses in oxygen minimum zones. And so it's really expanding our understanding of things. There's not only a high probability of novel discovery, we've already found some new viruses in these systems that haven't been seen before. And really what we're interested in is how these viral infections impact the nutrient cycling in oxygen minimum zones. And so it appears that these viruses are all targeting microbes that carry out these processes, but they're also encoding their own genes that are contributing to these different processes. And so how do we look at viruses? We collect massive amounts of seawater, we concentrate them down, and then we extract their DNA and RNA, sequence them, and do a lot of computational tricks and methods to identify viruses and connect them to their hosts to track their activity within the water column. And I'm 11 seconds faster than I thought I'd be. So thank you. Stay tuned.
I'm curious about reptiles and mammals in the oxygen mineral zones that they make it through and they live through them, or
Well,
whales.
so I mean, a whale is not trying to breathe in the a whale could hypothetically be fine because they're not breathing in the water. But anything that is like breathing through, I don't know. I study microbes, right? Come on. But they could hypothetically live there, but they're not trying to breathe within the water, and so yeah. I hope that answers.
What benefits do you think your research could have? Like, how could it help fisheries or local populations in Maine?
Yeah, so this particular area of research is a global view. It's important that we understand how these processes are carried out in these systems because we're trying to understand how our world is going to be changing as our oceans warm. And so what me and my colleagues learn about how the scale of transformation that's happening in these growing zones is going to be applied to models to help us predict how they change and how our entire planet changes in the future.
Go ahead, sir.
So have you seen any relationship between the viruses and the nitrification that you mentioned? Because I'm wondering if the viruses are changing the microbes themselves.
Yes, yeah. So we know that marine viruses, and there's a number of different ways in which viruses impact microbial activity. One is by just infecting and killing sort of the most active microbes in a community. And so the microbes that are going to be transforming the most accessible, it would be oxygen, but now it's nitrogen and oxygen minimum zones. Those are going to be the ones that are probably going to be killed most often because they're most active and sort of the most enticing host for viruses. So that's one way. Another is that they themselves can encode genes that ramp up their hosts' systems while they're undergoing infection. And so we have seen some genes related to nitrogen cycling encoded in viral genomes. And so likely during infection, they may be using those genes and changing the way that the host is interacting with the environment.
So with climate warming, and now we know with slowing of some of the currents that are going on, is this going to start geometrically increasing compared to what it's been in the past? Do you have any sense of, with that lack of mixing, that's going to expand these zones?
Yeah, that is one of the ways that they would be expanding. is through more stratification of the water column and less mixing and the ability to move oxygen around.
This might be a bit of a farther cry from your research than you would like, but are there any notable physical differences between viruses on land and viruses in the ocean, especially in low oxygen zones, as far as you know it?
Well, they're targeting different hosts. There's, it's fun to study viruses because there's a virus, you can find a virus that infects anything that's alive, right? And so some of the concepts and that we learn about how viruses interact with microbes in oxygen minimum zones are similar to the ways that they might be interacting with microbes in your gut, for example. So in a lot of ways, they, just like all life shares genes, like viruses share common characteristics, although at some levels they look very different from each other because they've evolved a lot since they were the same virus.
You talked about the effect of low oxygen zones. What about the low nitrogen zones after nitrogen cycling begins? Do those happen and if they do, what are their effects?
It's a good question. I am not a biogeochemist, although I gave you a lot of that information up here. So I don't want to get too ahead of my skis, as a colleague says often. But yeah, there's the nitrogen, like people are interested in the nitrogen cycle in oxygen minimum zones, and then also the sulfur cycle, which is another step after nitrogen. So it's a great question. And there might be other colleagues in the audience that might have a better answer. Yeah, exactly.
Anything else? Thank you, Julia. This was great.